Hey guys, Trojan here. So this is a topic that I've wanted to speak about since pretty much the inception of my channel. And with Shue's recent reply to Milo, this has given me a pretty good way to segue into what it is I wanted to say. So we're going to start off with me responding to some of what Shue said in her video, and hopefully that'll get us to a place where I can say what it was I wanted to say about the topic at hand. So let's get started.
And a year or so back, I was very much one of the people who believed in the Transgenders, who would see people like Milo, Stewart, and Riley Dennis and go, "You're not a man, you're not a woman, stop pretending." And so I would call them out on this stuff. I'd be like, you don't want to take hormones, you don't want to get surgery or anything, you're fake. And the reason this was because you guys know I grew up with a trans person. He is my best friend. And I saw a lot of the shit he went through. And to me, like, Milo and Riley were just like, it's fun! It's fun to be trans! Woo! I can be a girl and then I can be a guy the next day! You know, the whole thing. To me, calling out this was protecting trans people. Me saying, you're not really trans, was me going, like, please don't lump these people that are just, like, pretending and having fun in with the real trans people. So to me, it was like, I was actually passionate about the things I was saying.
Now to me, this is absolutely the correct response when it comes to someone like Riley Dennis. I'm not sure I would say the same thing about Milo, however. Milo did state fairly early on that he would undergo hormones as soon as he was able, and it did look like he truly did want to transition. When it comes to trans people like Riley, however, to the average person, it does diminish the plight of trans people as a group. But we'll get into that a bit more later on.
I still don't know. I don't know the genders thing. I don't know. I've come to the conclusion that if you're not hurting anybody, it's not a big deal, and you can call yourself whatever the fuck you want. But like, I feel like it's not my place to look at somebody like Riley Dennis and go, "You ain't trans." Like, I don't know. And the whole non-binary thing, I'm starting to think, like, yeah, there's no backing by science, but if people feel this way, isn't that enough backing?
And right here's where I took some major issue with this response. Yeah, there's no backing by science, but if people feel this way, isn't that enough backing? My issue with this is, where does this stop? If feelings are suddenly enough backing, then are other kin legitimate now? Saying that you're some kind of animal or mythical creature trapped inside a human's body isn't making a fucking mockery of the plight of trans people because you feel like that's who or what you are? How about headmates? Another one of the wonderful Tumblr self-diagnoses that are floating around that makes out that schizophrenia is just a gay old time had by all. Where do we draw the line between legitimate identifications and fuckwittery when feelings become the metric? Look, this isn't an attack on Shue. I love her content, and she's allowed to have whatever opinion she wants on this matter. I initially didn't even think about doing a response until I came across this comment on the video that I thought I would read to you now. Trans person checking in. Humans have two classes of sex hormones, androgens like testosterone and estrogens like estradiol. Exposure to androgens causes masculinization of the body and brain, and exposure to estrogens causes feminization. There is no third or fourth or 76th gender because there are only two sex hormones. However, significant exposure to both could make someone intersex. Transsexualism arises from a mismatch in hormonal development of the body and brain, where they end up differently sexed, and the resulting dissonance is experienced as gender dysphoria. Simply put, if you don't have gender dysphoria, your brain and body are the same sex and you aren't trans. I'm sure if you took an MRI of Milo's brain, you'd find it had fairly typical female development patterns, the result of which is apparent in her typically feminine mannerisms, speech, and styles of thinking. Somewhere along the way, people started confusing gender with personality, and transgenderism shifted from being viewed as a physiological medical condition to being something about self-expression and social identity. This is extremely damaging to real transsexuals who need to have their medical conditions taken seriously for what they are from the perspective of mental and physical health and the social and political attitudes. Genuine trans people need help and compassion for everything they go through. If we were taken more seriously and there weren't left as social taboos towards applying science to gender identity, maybe there'd be improvements to the care we receive. Maybe we could be in public and receive compassion instead of disgust. And maybe in countries with publicly funded healthcare, all our medical needs would be taken into account. The bottom line is, While it's great for Milo to explore her personality and self-identity, it has absolutely nothing to do with gender, and appropriating the trans label is harmful. Now, I'm no geneticist, and I have no idea if the science this person is talking about is 100% correct. The part that spoke to me personally, though, was the last 2 paragraphs there, and I'll tell you why. Gather around. It's story time, folks. Growing up, for me, there was 2 types of trans. Transvestites and transsexuals. These were very easy to define. A transvestite was somebody who enjoyed dressing in the clothes of the opposite sex, though this was generally only applied to men, drag queens and the like. And a transsexual was someone who suffered from gender dysphoria and was doing everything they could so that their outward bodies could match who they felt like they were inside. I'm not sure when the term transgender became a thing. At a guess, it was around the same time that gender as a social construct narrative was being pushed, but frankly, I detest this term as it muddies the water regarding what is already for most a very confusing topic. For instance, I've just completed my bachelor's degree, and in the first year, I had a teacher who identified as trans. Now, as a mature age student, she was a couple of years younger than myself, but her identification as trans was always confusing to me. She'd always presented as female, so it wasn't what I understand gender fluid to be. And I knew she was well into Tumblr, so I figured at the end of the day, she was what has now become to be known as a transgender. One night we were drinking together and I asked her where she stood on the idea of gender being a social construct. She said she agreed with this, absolutely it was. I then told her that from where I stand, transsexuals are living, breathing proof that gender is not a social construct, but is in fact innate to us like our sexuality is. Even if it isn't something that is entirely biological like sex is. Because there is an entire group of people who are born a particular sex, socialize their entire adolescence to act as the gender that matches their sex, but were flat out incapable of doing so because it just isn't who they are. The look on her face at that point showed me that I'd just blown her mind in some respects. She said she had literally never thought of it that way, and at that point the conversation then turned to how gender can be reinforced socially. Here's the thing though. I found out something like 18 months later that she was in fact a transsexual. She'd been born a man. She was so well passing, whatever that means at the end of the day, as a trans woman, that myself and anyone who had met her as a teacher never saw her as anything but a woman, and her use of the label transgender, with all the baggage of the multiple gender crowd that brought to that term, left everyone in my classes confused as to what she meant when she labelled herself as transgender, as she was a woman and nothing else to all of us. If the label she had used was transsexual, now to myself at least, she still would have been nothing more but a woman to me, but there wouldn't have been any of the confusion surrounding what she meant by her label. Here's another example. Sometime back here in Australia, the bank ANZ announced that it was going to fix the gap in superannuation earned by men and women by simply paying women more super. On the Facebook announcement, I began engaging with whomever it was that was running the Facebook account at the time, and I questioned why it was the ANZ Bank was paying women less super than men. That's illegal. They admitted that there were many factors that led to women earning less super than men over a lifetime, the major one being childbirth, as super is directly tied to how many hours you work and so on. Someone had earlier asked, what about trans women? The reply had been that trans women would then qualify for this extra super as well. During my conversation, I asked why it is they were including trans women in this initiative. If they themselves admitted that the major factor was childbirth, there isn't a group of women on the planet less likely to give birth than trans women. Their response was, of course, in the interest of equality and inclusivity. I then asked what exactly constituted a trans woman at that point. I mean, where were we drawing the line? If I was claiming trans status, would I have had to have had surgery? Would I simply have to be on hormones? Or would it just be that I'd have to claim that I was in fact a woman to receive that pay bump? Because honestly, once they decided to include trans women in the interest of inclusivity, they then opened the door for every man working there to tick the female box on the old form, receive the extra super, and put ANZ right back to where they began on the issue, or risk being labelled exclusionary. Now obviously, at the end of that last example, I was exaggerating, in the interest of shitposting a bullshit initiative. But that's the point of my problem with the term transgender. When a term like that can be used to describe my uni teacher, who left home at a very young age and had to travel across the world to finally transition and become the person that she believed herself to be and find some acceptance. And can also be used to describe someone like Riley fucking Dennis, who grows his hair long, throws on some eyeliner and a fucking tank top, and claims to be a lesbian, then the term is broken. And I honestly cannot understand how more transsexuals don't look at shit like this and just feel like their plight is being appropriated by children wanting to feel special. Now, I can't for certain say that everybody who acts like Riley, or even Riley in particular, is definitely doing it for attention. But one of those situations definitely does seem to be making a flat-out mockery of the other. Maybe not to the extent that other kin and the like are, but Jesus, it's not helpful to getting people going through some of the most difficult shit they will ever have to face and gaining acceptance by society at large, especially when they aren't extremely well passing, as it were, the compassion, help, and acceptance that they deserve. So here we are, at the end of yet another video. Now that I'm done with uni, I'm going to try and upload a little bit more often. It depends on whether or not I come across things that inspire me to speak, as it were. If you enjoyed this one, like, comment, subscribe, or, don't. I'm not your father. And thank you for sticking through this video with me, and thank you to the 2 or 3 of you that have already subscribed. Now I guess I'll catch you cunts at another time.